have, if you're new to us, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome. We tend to start about 5 minutes after, but we tend to end maybe 30 or 40 minutes after the hour. And so we
True.
finish our formal conversation, and then we have a very lively engagement with the people that are on the line. And that's still recorded. It's something that we don't put out, but it's something that we have for general content creation and what you might consider B-roll, because there's a lot of value in that that engagement, that back and forth.
Yeah.
Last week we had an excellent conversation with Colin Grabo, who's the associate director of trade studies at the Cato Institute, and there was a number of members on the line who, at the end of the conversation, wanted to chime in. And it's one of the benefits of being members is that not only do you get live direct access to this conversation, but you get to engage with our special guests. Uh, you get, live direct access to just to be able to engage with our guests. And so that's something that
Yeah.
we encourage you to do. And maybe we put out a series of our best
Yeah.
after official segment pieces for Christmas gift type thing.
Let me ask one question.
Sure.
Everybody speaks Spanish here or no? Let me see.
Not everyone. I would look at I'd say most people probably do. But
Okay.
That's a good
That's fine.
question.
I'm just asking just to see.
Español, 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 español.
Yeah,
Yeah,
everybody.
el mejor parte. Yeah.
Yeah, one
Uh,
thing that I'll say is that if you have questions, feel free to put them in chat in either English or Spanish, and podemos atender a cualquier pregunta en inglés o español, no importa.
sí.
We will have our conversation in Spanish, or excuse me, in English.
In English. Yeah.
Pero
Okay. But
Ángel,
if you feel
está
comfortable
bienvenido.
if you
Absolutely.
feel comfortable doing the question in Spanish, that's fine.
That's
And we'll
fine.
go through.
That's fine.
Okay.
Absolutely. We want people to
Well,
participate. And I think on that note, let's go ahead and jump in here. My name is Sam Tallman. I'm Director of Energy Services for Green Power Technologies Puerto Rico. We do small hydroelectric projects in Puerto Rico and around the US. And I'm joined by my conversation partner, Tom King. Tom, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, it's after midnight for me because I'm doing this from Spain. But it's necessary. So I've actually gone beyond wine and now I'm back to coffee. So
There you go. The horseshoe effect. Um, Tom is founding director of Fundación Borincana and my regular conversation partner for the Energy Forum. Today we have our Energy in 60 Minutes conversation where we're going to cover the last month of news and highlights really around the energy sector in Puerto Rico. A number of things have happened that we were going to cover, particularly in October, but also in the end of September since our last segment. Before we get there, just a couple of housekeeping notes. This is our second segment of the month. We have another one on Tuesday, which is our general forum meeting. We'll be joined by CP Smith, where we're going to be talking about the upcoming political elections, the implications, and a grab bag of other topics that or potpourri, or a whirlwind of engagement with CP to round out some of the conversations that we've had recently, and also take a look forward. I mentioned in my email that next Tuesday is our final Energy Forum, final meeting of the year. Yeah, I was wrong. It's not. We have a full programming of November. We've got 3 segments in November. We have Power Hour. We've got Puerto Rico Energy in 60 Minutes. And we have another forum at the end of November, which will be our final public forum of the year. The first Power Hour of November will be with Eduardo Batia, talking about the outcome of the political elections. So join us for that. And we'll have, I think, a really good conversation. That's at 6 p.m. on November 16th, I think. Javier, if you could confirm that.
Where's Javier?
Yeah. let me confirm that right now. It is November 14th, excuse me. So November 14th at 6 p.m. Puerto Rico time. We'll be talking with the former Senator Eduardo Batia. And we also have this month thanks, Javier. Also this month, we have 2 working groups. So as the outcome of our National Clean Energy Week event exactly a month ago today, we have started a microgrid development working group as well as a circular economy of solar panels working group. These are 2 of many conversations that we want to have with members, led by members, with the deliverables designed by members, where we get a lot of perspectives, the experts around the table to come up with whether it's a policy brief or recommendations for regulation or op-eds or whatever it may be that's the most appropriate outcome. Join us for those. If you have a particular perspective, be there. I know CP, Adiel, Angel, we've got the full microgrid panel from that event with us on the line today. So it's awesome. You guys are bringing 3 very different perspectives to this theme. We want to leverage that, I guess, is the main piece. Angie, your hand is up. This is perfect timing. I'm gonna give you the floor before we jump into our segment with your son.
Bienvenido.
Adelante, Angie. Take out the unmute yourself.
Ay, sí, estoy aquí como jugando. Hi.
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 You watching me?
Sí, no te estamos viendo, pero estamos escuchándote. Go ahead, sigue.
Okay. Hi, how are you? Good evening, everybody.
Good
It's a
evening.
pleasure
Thanks for joining
to
us.
hear all of you, okay? So I just can't tell you. Go ahead and God bless you, okay? I
Pues
keep
muchísimas
hearing
gracias.
you, okay?
Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros.
Ay, mira,
It's
hablando
really...
español, me está
Angie.
haciendo pasar trabajo.
No. Mira, bueno, es para hacerte sufrir un poquito.
Sí.
Pero mira, Angie,
Nerviosito.
tienes que estar muy orgulloso de tu hijo, ese jovencito que tú tienes aquí.
Ay, sí, yo también estoy mega orgullosa de él, de los 3 hijos
Cuéntanos,
míos.
por favor, ¿cuándo fue la primera vez que él mostró interés
Corta.
en ingeniería?
En la energía.
Energía eléctrica, como en tu perspectiva como mamá, cuéntanos de tu hijo, de cómo comenzó la aventura.
Bueno, yo sé que por lo menos desde que se lo puso en la mente, él echó para adelante y salió para adelante y es un exitoso en todo esto. Así es que nada,
bueno.
vivo orgullosa de todo lo que ha logrado y lo que va a seguir logrando, ¿ok? Así que, hijo
Gracias.
mío, te
Okay.
amo, los amo y éxito a todos, ¿ok?
Thank you,
Sí.
Angie. Muchas
beso.
gracias y es por su éxito que lo tenemos con nosotros
Yeah.
hoy.
You
Let's,
didn't
Muy
know that
bien.
this was going to turn into this is your life.
Te lo digo que
Exactly.
hubo una oportunidad ahí, yo lo abrí esperando para lo mejor, yo esperaba un cuento sobre Ángel cuando fue nene, con una batería
CP,
ahí, con una bombilla,
CP,
con una
eso,
batería, quién sabe,
Ángel
pero
Sanz, este
eso es para
su-
la discusión después.
Exacto.
Eso es para la discusión después. But let's go ahead and jump into our
Let's
conversation.
go. Okay,
Let's go.
gracias.
So
Gracias,
Angel, we have there's a couple different things that we could talk about today. A lot has happened in the last month. You and I talked briefly about economic development, and energy is the key driver for economic development at your Martes Informativo on Tuesday. There's Energy Bureau activity with regards to the battery demand response program. There's information on Luma, the rate adjustment for Luma, basically saying that they're operating at $110 million deficit, and it's actually gone up. It's 132.7 million as of the latest reporting that I've seen. Let's start with some of the economic development themes that you and I started to cover on Tuesday.
Yeah, and I think, well,
Yeah,
first of
jump
all, I wanted to say hi to everybody, all of you, all are my friends, and I really appreciate that. Probably don't know Glorinel, so nice to meet you, but Moisés, Ricardo, Rodolfo, Luis Ayala, Carlos, Francisco, everyone, I appreciate that. So, okay, ahora, okay, I see. Sometimes when you don't see the face.
Saludos.
Okay. Saludos. Gracias.
Nice to meet you, Ángel.
Sí,
I follow
muy
your
bien.
podcast through YouTube, so
Muy
I know
bien.
you, but you don't know me.
Okay. So thank you for joining, and I'm really happy that we joined forces for this today. So that's okay. And if you have questions, you can go ahead in the chat, or you just raise the hand, and you could do it in Spanish. That's fine. Okay, so that's good. In terms of the economic development, one of the things that I wanted to tie in with what you just said is that we are in an urgency of generation right away, quickly. We cannot allow continue having these relevos de carga because it doesn't help the economy, doesn't help the businesses, it doesn't help the emotional mindset and the feeling of the people. And you just get back to this political scene of, oh, we need to cancel Luma's contract, which that's not what I mean, but that's the political say for everyone, and that's not the right thing to do in my own opinion. And we can talk about it, why and all that. But in all honesty, there's a lot of things in the electrical system that are affecting our economic development. So anything will not happen for tomorrow. It will take year, 2 years just to have the balance of more generation to what our demand is. So I think someone needs to talk in front of everyone and say, this is not going to be get solved by tomorrow, period. We'll continue to have this. It doesn't matter if it's Luma or if it's a old Prepa or whoever. It's just will continue. And at least the news that I heard or we saw, and we talked about it on Tuesday, about the batteries for stabilizing our system. It just has a note, very important, that says this will help to minimize all the relevos de carga to almost 95%. That's great news. I don't know if someone has really take that deep breath and say, this is really one key step, but it will not happen until 2025 at the end. So still a year, 2 years. Someone got to say, this is still an issue for us. So what do you think?
Yeah, and I think, just going to that specific was $760 million. Those are federal funds for 430 megawatts of battery, utility scale battery packs at peaker plants across the island. And you mentioned that their best case estimate is the end of 2025. I think one of the questions I wanted to end with was, which is regard to your optimism, and don't answer that. Yeah, we'll get there, but the challenge is a lot of folks that have experience in the energy sector in Puerto Rico have not seen things go to plan. The idea that something would be best case scenario is very wishful thinking, and that is, so let's say it gets delayed by 6 months for whatever reason. We know that federal funds can be challenging to work with. We know that big scale procurement projects like this, large scale procurement projects like this can be delayed anyway, and in any jurisdiction in the world. And we have a particular challenge with getting to a close of deal status. So let's say middle of 2026, that's the beginning of hurricane season, installation, who knows what gets delayed, hurricane season's getting extended. There's a lot of things that could still get in the way before we feel the success, right? And that's now halfway through the next governor's term. It gets complicated politically. Like, there's a lot going on there. And one of the considerations that I mentioned on your show this week that I'd love, Tom and you to chime in on is, those are federal funds. And so one of the things that we need to be thinking about with regards to economic development is a long-term sustainable strategy. If you look at the most recent economic development plans for the island, many of those say, okay, we're in a moment where we will rely on federal funds for the next decade. And that's fine. They're there. We're in a moment of rebuild. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt, and there's federal funds to do that. But that can't be the only strategy.
Right.
And it's
Right.
not sustainable, and it doesn't attend to the actual pillars of competitiveness. We can have batteries installed by the end of 2025, but when one of those needs to be replaced or upgraded or maintained, and I'll be entirely honest, I don't know what the $760 million budget looks like. I don't know what the long-term maintenance strategy is there, but I'm concerned that we're using federal funds for projects that really need to be sustained in the long term. And that again puts into risk economic development.
And just, I mean, I also want to just recognize that we actually see some good thinking here, right? I mean, the fact that they're looking at accelerating and putting batteries at peaker locations is actually quite intelligent, right? I mean, in terms of all of the competing things going on out there, and the definite need for new gas capacity and other things to stabilize in the short term, the the old generation that is no longer working with Scotch tape and baling wire, but it's also diminishing the amount of potential long term peaking power. Now, it also perpetuates and extends the need for oil fired generation, right? I mean, you're storing energy into these batteries that is being generated by oil fired generation, and more of it, frankly, in the off hours. But from the point of view of operating the system, it's much more stable, and the batteries themselves at these locations are going to have much longer useful life. I mean, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, obviously they're going to have to be changed, but the opportunity is there. And then the other question, because I haven't seen the detail, it's great to get 780 million of federal dollars, but what's the deal with these things, right? Because you still need the working capital to reconstruct it, get them going, and then get the money back on these federal contracts. So I'm not sure. I guess I've seen the RFPs that are supposedly going out, whether they're looking for effectively a financed solution for the installation of these things, in which case the contractor is going to pay to have them, test them, and then effectively get the money directly from the federal government. Otherwise, we're back to the same issue we have with the bankruptcy slowing everything down, and that working capital has got to come from somewhere, right? And that somewhere is the ratepayers generally. So complication within complication. Sorry, Angel.
No, that's good to have that perspective in terms
Yeah.
of the future, because everybody
Yeah.
focus on now and let's say year and a half or 2 years, but then how we're building 10, 20 years later so we can replace whatever needs to be replaced. And if there's no income money getting into, that's going to be an issue. What I can tell you about the RFP, just to let you know, because I dig a little bit, not that I read their RFP, but at least I know that what was contracted to Tesla in this case was they supplying the batteries or the system.
Right.
They are not going to be the contractor to install them. Okay. So yesterday or Tuesday, I put out the notice of the first RFP related to this program for contractors to do the demolition, to do the design and installation of these batteries. So really how it worked was, let's get the best pricing on the materials on the main battery system. And now they are going through the different RFP in 6 different locations. And this is the first one that came out.
Right.
About a week or 2 days or 3 days ago. So that's how they are doing this. I haven't gone through the RFP, but at least what is good is people want things by tomorrow, and that's not possible, period.
No.
Even whoever's going to be the governor in Puerto Rico will not do anything the next 2-3 years anyway. And then the next four years, next period, as what has been happening in Puerto Rico for the last 24 years, we'll have a new administration. It doesn't matter who's going to be there, because that has been our history for the last 6, 7 governors. We don't have a
Well-
continuous administration that will have a follow through to all these projects. So things will get delayed, as you said, Sam.
Well, and I think that it's really important. This goes back to the idea of expectation management, because if the new governor or even Genera or Luma or the contractors for this come in and say, we can promise the world, there needs to be a broader sense within the audience of that message that, well, first off, there needs to be a sense within the audience that that's not really the case, but also we need to demand more articulate leadership, I think, from all of these players to say, this is going to take its time. One of the things, and this ties into 2 other pieces of news, which is the other major contribution, let's say, of the federal government that closed this past week or last 2 weeks was an 800 and what was it?
61.3. Can I get that right?
$861.3 million loan guarantee or loan for about 400 megawatts. That's from clean flexible energy, which is AES's solar farms.
AES and Total.
Yeah, Total and AES's solar farms. Those won't also be done tomorrow, but what is pretty much guaranteed is that AES will be closed by the end of 2027. And so, again, just focusing on expectation management, how do those 2 ideas balance is the development of new projects, the development of battery storage on peaker plants, the development of additional utility scale projects. All of that takes time, whereas AES, its closure will be from one day to the next. And then that's something that will be very abrupt. Just running quick numbers, they're planning on producing 460,000 megawatt hours a year. That's about 96 days, 2,300 hours of production. AES for 96 days does about over a million megawatt hours, but it's producing for a lot more than 96 days for, let's call it 35 days, or excuse me, 350 days of the year. That's 3,780,000 megawatt hours. So it's just almost an order of magnitude difference with regards to the power that's coming online and the power that's going offline. The 430 megawatts of battery storage plays a big role in that, in supporting that transition. But it's expensive. It's expensive. It's slow, and it's part of the expectation management. Dark days, as far as I'm concerned, may be ahead just in terms of balancing these 2 different things. But at the same time, that's a necessary step to get to the next chapter of growth. It has to happen for Puerto Rico to get to the next chapter of growth.
Well, and what we're experiencing now is old oil plants self-retiring. Right. I mean, how many of these things are, can you maintain, what's the next one that's going to break down and not be able to run and, just get to the point where it doesn't make any sense to throw more money at it and leave us short. So we're in that period, I think, as Angel said, and we're trying to do the things we can to back that up. I'd throw in, I think it's 50-50 that AES is going to be asked to keep that plant open a little longer. It's getting harder and harder to do that, and AES definitely wants out, and they should. But that power is needed.
I'd say 50-50 they get asked, 100% they say no. I mean, that's the challenge, right? Angel, go ahead.
Yeah, I just in those terms of good news, which even though I'm more of a renewable energy guy, but obviously I see the things in objectively. So I saw another news which I was looking at it and I don't find it right now, but also Genera got the go ahead for 10 peaker units too for generation. And also is in that time frame of it 1 year to 2 years basically of putting that generation. If someone have more detail of that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and that's flexible generation, right? Those are
Yes.
the
Yeah.
20 megawatt genset type of projects
Yeah.
that, strategically located throughout the island go a long way
Yeah.
to supporting renewable energy growth and development on the island, supporting some of the utility scale projects that require better grid management, support Luma in being able to take certain substations offline to replace them and repair the lines and whatnot. Those types of projects should be, as far as I'm concerned, prioritized as enabling everything else that we want
Yeah.
to get done. And just one last point here, we need to make sure that there's a lot of like devil pointing, so to speak, and if that's the devil, that's bad, we can't have that. And we've talked about this with other guests, but we need to have a broad mix of generation storage. It's got to be diversified. There was an article that came out this week from the Huffington Post that started with this line. It says, just before the rain began one afternoon in July, Lisa Aguilera Rios went looking for the best spot along the shoreline to see the ship she feared might bring fiery death. And there's some doomsdayness about the way that this is talked about, and of course the regulatory challenges that the New Fortress Energy ship has gone through. No, we couldn't afford to take it offline. It reminds me a little bit of lines that Christopher Hitchens used to say when he was talking about, he said, Dr. Samuel Johnson, when he first published his, Dictionary of the English Language in 1775, a club of respectable ladies in London came and congratulated him for, leaving out all the indecent words. And he said, ladies, I congratulate you for looking them all up. And so there's something about, like, if you go looking for offense, if you go looking for things that we want to tear down, it's quite easy to be against projects, right? And what we need to do is be productive in the way that we're thinking about how do we actually get there, as opposed to closing the door for certain technologies that are fundamental to us being able to minimally keep the lights on and then go from there, right?
Yeah, 100%, and I agree that we need to do whatever is needed to do to have the generation covering our demand, period. There's no way we can continue just idealizing. I'm going to continue idealizing, but we need to work now, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, and as long as we get to the goal of 100% 2050, we need to go through a journey just to make that happen and make it feasible. So that's.
So let me ask you a question about one of the other pieces of news, because I think what you just mentioned, Angel, is really important. Luma has indicated that they are operating at about $132.7 million revenue insufficiency. A lot of that came from fuel charges. A lot of that came from some of the other elements of the bill. They petitioned the Energy Bureau for a rate hike this quarter. They were rejected on that. How do we anticipate a sustainable utility from an economics to sustainability perspective? How do they operate at $130 million loss on a quarterly basis? How do we move forward from this place where we're subsidizing operating and setting a precedent for people who, not covering the bill?
Yeah, I mean, you're stealing from the capital budget, right? I mean, and the other concern I'll throw out, and I actually do want Angel to weigh in, is I'm concerned how much of this decision is actually political in terms of the decision not to do this in the run up to an election. By the officials in PREB. I think they've done an incredibly good job of not being political, but I don't have the breakdown really.
In all honesty, I want to keep and maintain my honor on the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, so I don't think that was political more than anything else. It might have some pressure. That's what I think. But
Sure.
at the end, they made the decisions without, I believe, without political. That's my thinking. I don't want it to. I'm kind of blind with that. I would love to just keep it like that. However, before, I just remember with the government that we had before the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, that just
Yeah.
happened without any problem, and no data, no
Yep.
conversation or justification, and that's why I
Yep.
think there's more than that. We got 5 commissioners. They see the data, so it's really difficult to have the political, getting into that more than it was before, in all honesty.
Well, and all the documentation is publicly available.
Yeah,
I
it's
happen to
available.
I happen to agree on Hill. I think the one thing makes it lean so that it's not political is the incumbent isn't up for reelection, right? So if the
Yeah,
incumbent was running for reelection, it might be a different thing,
it
but
might be.
it's not going to hurt him one way or another because he's planning what is next for him anyway.
Yeah,
I think,
so
I mean, look, I agree with you guys too. And you know, I think it's not political in the sense that somebody told them to do this, right?
mhm.
I think it's politic, not necessarily political, in that you're looking at not just this quarter, you're looking at a continuum. You're looking at a number of different budgets and a number of different developments. And I think that they had the, let's call it the luxury, to say, you know, look, we've got oil prices and other things spiking. Yes, we're running at a deficit, but you know we can always raise the rates if we need to at the next quarterly. You know, we'll get another recommendation, etc. Let's not raise rates running into an election just because we have the luxury not to,
I
right?
give
So
you that one. I
yeah,
give you that one because
yeah,
they have done it one quarter or the other, and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
could be acceptable, yes.
yeah,
But I do think that that's going to continue every quarter. What we need to
yeah.
look at is the basics tariff that wasn't changed since 1989 until 2016, I believe, or 2018. I
Mhm.
don't remember that time frame. We cannot allow to have another 30 years without a rate increase. The one that are in the typical
Right,
$4, $10, $5, and then the energy cost, not the quarterly. I'm talking about the base
right,
tariff. That should be something that every 3 year or 5 year, whatever the conditions are, that should be evaluated and revised. And I don't know, in all honesty, how's that been into the process. So, so going back to
yeah,
your point, Sam, about the how a utility could operate with that kind of loss. Well, first, the prep needs to validate that they operating in those losses, which in all honesty, I don't know how do they get through all that process, but in terms of looking forward for the next 20 years, 30 years, we cannot be without revising our basic tariff that are not dependent on the quarterly changes. It's more uh, on a revised schedule for that tariff. And I think that would be healthier than ticking around with the quarterlies, because the quarterly are basically energy and the fuel charges. So go ahead, Sam. I know you put in
Well,
the chat.
if you're a masochist and like to read regulatory dockets, that's the docket where they talk about the revenue insufficiency. But one of the other things that I think is important here is that Haneda came out almost immediately and supported the Energy Bureau's decision to reject the rate hike, and so they may be seeing certain things in Hunter Henry, not Hunter Henry, that's he's on my fantasy football team, in Henry Hub, and gas prices moving forward, where they say we can actually come up with a more reasonable rate for the next quarter based on where prices are going. It's hard to parse out exactly what it is, but my immediate concern is that if, going back to the economic development situation, if you are paying attention to what's happening on the island, are interested in economic stability, economic growth, a stable regime where you could invest in, open a business, and we'll get to Solex here in a second, but open a factory perhaps, being able to see, okay, where the island's broader government is out of bankruptcy, PREPA's bankruptcy seems to be sort of hopefully at the end of its renegotiation and adjustment period. We're in a different era where we're looking broadly as a community, the government, the fiscal board, everybody's looking at how do we grow sustainably in a stabilized manner moving forward. I see a headline where, okay, the utility is once again operating over $100 million in deficit. And I think that's a major step backwards. It's a bad headline, right? So we need to make sure that if there's more nuance to it, the media can always be relied on to provide a bloodthirsty narrative, but we need to make sure that that is parsed out for people who are looking for it. It's like that concerns me for the short term and the medium term, because we need a utility that can operate sustainably with a budget that they can articulate and meet.
I agree 100% with what you just said. There's we talk about it that, you know, the Centro para la Nueva Economía came out with connecting the dots for Puerto Rico's electric power system. And he did a good job at the end in the last 5 pages of the document, talking about the contract and the metrics for Luma and for Genera. There's not still a lot of data just to get through with Genera, but at least with Luma, with 3 years, they got more of the details. And one of the things that caught my attention was, and it's related to that operation cost that you're talking about, Sam, is that there's an expected savings that we need to have out of the contract from Luma. So how can you handle the losses on their operating, what you just said, cost, versus also need to meet those savings? And if they are not really getting into that level of operating healthy, how can they focus on even getting to the savings that we need? It's a challenge.
Sergio put something. It's a huge challenge.
I mean,
and the CNE. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Oh no, I was just going to say, yeah, and it's the whole contract is a whole other conversation, and I hope that we're going to get to have it with Sergio, because you know, he actually has a great understanding, having, you know, looked at this from the very beginning. You know, I would say guys like Tomas Torres Placa and others who have looked at it, you know, myself, Sam, because we're nerds, and well, hey, I mean, I came on your show, Martes Informativo, in 2019, and we talked about how's the best way to restructure the debt.
I know.
So, I mean, you know, they're an agent, you know, Luma, and the metrics that they're looking at are the metrics in the main contract. He does talk about the supplemental agreement, but you're comparing it to the original contract. The supplemental agreement is supposed to carry you until you come out of bankruptcy, right? When you come out of bankruptcy, the assumption is you are going to have the resources, you know, to invest, to actually do the things and create the savings and you know, move everything forward. And then you, Luma, are responsible for these targets. We haven't come out of bankruptcy yet. The contract hasn't even started yet.
Well,
and CNE, and that's really a tough one, because we want to have the savings, but we are not even yet there yet.
Well, and CNE put it very delicately, I thought, where they said, you know, we don't have information. Maybe there have been savings. I think it's safe to assume there haven't been. If you have savings, that's the sort of thing that, for an organization like Luma that has historically struggled with public relations, that's the sort of thing that you would shout from the rooftop is, look, part of the reason you brought us in is because we know how to run the utility more efficiently. And this is the proof of that. This is, you know, the value that we're bringing here, the savings. Now, this is in the broader context, right? It's not just you come in and inherit an antique, you know, a vintage grid like Puerto Rico's and then immediately realize those savings. But at some point that needs to be articulated. Where it's like, look, this is the forecast on when we actually will. If we didn't have it this year, what is the forecast for the short-term future? Because again, going into the economic development piece here, what companies are looking for is not necessarily an easy environment, though an easy environment goes a long way, but a well-defined environment. And so if I can have predictability and stability, that goes so far for me to be able to say, here's what my P&L, here's what my pro forma looks like for the long term. And this is probably a good segue for thinking about Solex, which is a new solar panel manufacturer that's opening a factory in Aguadilla. They're planning on pumping out a gigawatt of 800 megawatts to a gigawatt of 600 plus watt panels per year out of that facility. That's not something that they're there for 3 to 5 years. That's a long-term investment to be able to bring the machinery and set up that supply line, and then sell to a Puerto Rico market for decades. And so there's those types of strategies. If we want to attract more companies that are going to hire hundreds of people, invest hundreds of millions of dollars in machinery, in training, in their own cogeneration plant, whatever it may be, we need to at least be able to articulate to those players, this is the strategy. And that's for new players, right? We spoke to Arnaldo Bisonó, the head of the Energy Committee for Industriales, and they have sounded the alarm in every possible way to say the existing forget about bringing new companies in. The existing companies are seeing this as a critical emergency, and we have to collectively have a sense of urgency. And 430 megawatts of battery at peaker plants at the end of next year is great. It's not urgent. And so how do we make sure that tomorrow the lights stay on for operations? I wanted to just shifting gears slightly. You personally participate in the CBES Battery Demand Response Program, right?
Yes, but before, Sam, just getting into a question that has Adil in the chat. Can you go
Yeah, it's a
over
good
it?
one.
Because
Yeah,
it's
perfect.
related
Yeah.
to that subject before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
go
So
ahead.
Adil's question for those who can't see the chat.
Yeah, repeat the question only because
Yeah.
any video viewers probably won't see the chat. So
Yeah, Ariel's question is, what entity singular should be leading the oversight for these efforts, from procurement, framework, implementation, and oversight? And he mentions that we have FEMA, DOE, EPA, HUD, FERC, USDA, PREPA, LUMA, GENERA, PREB, the P3, the Public-Private Partnership Authority, DEC, the Junta, let's see,
Core
Core
three.
3. There's a lot of players, and that was another point that at the beginning of Sergio's article, he says part of the challenge is the panoply of different voices here who all have their own little fiefdom of authority, but who's overseeing it. Angel, I'm going to turn that over to you. I've got my own thoughts. I know Tom has his, but let's hear yours.
No idea. In all honesty, because if I think of this, it cannot be the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, period. They have their regulatory issues and all these that they're trying to handle. So it's not like that. I believe, where's the money coming and where's that money getting into that we need to make sure that is going through. I think Core 3 has a really high level of responsibility because it's getting through them. What will happen with Core 3 with any new government, any new governor? Will stay or no? That's going to be a big risk because that's where the funneling of money is going through, and then it's dispersing. So if I'm going to have one of them to be responsible, at least from the standpoint of where the money is coming, I would say top Core 3. However, us as and this is my thinking, as a governor, if I'm the governor, I will make sure that I have someone or two or getting just through each week, getting through each of the action items from any of those organizations, and just making sure that we are getting the top one or two priorities, urgency, and then moving forward to the longest goals. That's my thinking, in all honesty, right now. I don't have anything more than that.
So let me offer a thought and get your guys' take on it here, because I think in an ideal world, and this goes to CP's comment in the chat where he says, I like the separation of powers, and CP, we'll get to you in just a moment when we're almost closing our conversation. But I think one of
don't
the
let him talk until we get to the after hours stuff.
I was tempted to use my executive powers here and just put his hand down. But
Gotta get out of the family hour first.
the in an ideal world, we have a active legislative body that can do oversight of not only the executive branch, but of who the executive branch contracts. And so the Energy Bureau has the benefit of being independent and the downside of following what the legislative branch produces. And so I think now they're totally unprepared right now to do that level of oversight.
They're totally incompetent.
That's the lack of preparation.
I didn't mean that to be a general statement, but take it as you will. They don't have the skills, experience, or anything else, as evidenced by all of the Fuera Luma conversations that everybody's doing. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'd love to see a legislative branch with ideas, right? And if energy is the critical emergency where we need a sense of urgency, then we need to elect leaders who are literate enough to be able to deal with it. Because if we're electing leaders that can't talk about the number one issue, not just for everyday life, but for economic development, for everything else that we think is critically important, then frankly, they're inadequate for the moment. And we need people who can step up to the plate and say, I understand what the issues are, and I'm versed enough to be able to have a detailed conversation on them. It just seems like that oversight doesn't exist. We're not on a path.
CP, go ahead.
Yes. So I think that this is a question that, and I'm thankful for Adiel. This is a question that I've heard in various forms in the last, I'd say 4 years, definitely. And I think it almost falls back on the caciquismo problem that Puerto Rico has, that we're always looking for the cacique. We're always looking for that one point, that one solution that will take care of it. And I would actually like to propose a different take on this. That the issue isn't, or the solution isn't, a one authority that takes care of this. It's actually just a general lack of capacity in a number of agencies. And we do want this separation of powers. We do want these entities and institutions to represent different equities, because that tension, even though it's inefficient, like that old refrain, democracy is the worst form of government except for all others. I think that when we talk about energy management and these energy policy, we're in the same line, that this interconnection, interrelation of these different organizations representing different equities can squeeze out a better result over the long term. The real weakness is, and I think along with what Sam is mentioning, that you would like a legislature that had the capacity. Well, we would like an energy bureau that had the capacity. The commissioners are fantastic. The staff is great. There's just not enough of them for the scope of work that they have. Luma Energy, same thing. Everyone that I meet there is super comprometidos. They're super passionate about moving Puerto Rico. The people in Luma Energy have had so much courage to step up and say, yes, I will join this organization, when everybody's piling in on them and they're getting blamed for things that are resulting from Genera. So so you see some conviction, you see that, but maybe if you were going to fault Luma, it's that they didn't hire enough people. That could be a valid issue. But all of those organizations I look at, they're all strapped to capacity, trying to undo a problem that was 3 decades in the making. And now we're trying to, we're one of the most impatient as a cooperativa to see this success. But like Angel starts out with, it's going to take more than a day. It's going to take a while, you know, but a lot of that, I believe, is not because we need to have one single cacique that's going to tell all of us in our different separate bohíos what we're going to do. Instead, it is going to be about how do we raise the capacity of these organizations so that then we can actually get the effective outcomes that each equity represents, will result in, I think, an overall equitable and just system for the next version of what Puerto Rico needs.
Angel, go ahead and reflect on what CP offered, and then I've got one final question. We're coming up on an hour.
Well, in all honesty, that's good, CP, that you just said that. I think everyone needs that. Even our companies need that. You need that. Everyone here needs that capacity just to get through the challenge that we have. So I think that's the responsibility of each of those organizations or businesses or whatever. But still, I think we need to have, I know you don't like that, but it's kind of like that vision, that head, that I don't want to get political here. It's that point of understanding. It's like putting that in that wall and say, how can we accelerate this? Because if you ask the government at some point, and I was meeting with one friend of the government this week, and I asked this question. I said, how do you feel we've come through with the FEMA funding and accelerating all these projects compared to other jurisdictions like New Jersey, Louisiana, that has this type of issues? And surprisingly, he told me we have been ahead of them in terms of the same amount of time and years. So even if we are great on that, it's not enough, because up to now we have used only 10% of all that money. So
Well, I'd like to add
how that comes into the picture.
I'll just add with one other comment, that I think what is a very fair critique is that we do have an emergency in Puerto Rico, but nobody's really responding as if it's an emergency. And I think that is where leadership comes in. So to Angel's point, you know, I don't think that a central authority that has the power in the clearinghouse to make, knock heads together and make things happen. But certainly what Puerto Rico has absolutely lacked at the very highest levels, even at the governor level, in particular, the present governor, is actually a clear vision and that leadership that would then get everybody to support it and behind. And I think that is a moral vacuum, that is a kind of like a leadership vacuum that then leaves it open for just whatever happens, and that's what we're seeing.
So it's a governor.
So we're coming up on an hour, and I want to be able to continue this conversation once we formally close. But Angel, I want to ask one more question and close our conversation here, which is, given everything we've just talked about, the last month of news, the fact that you've been in the marketplace for a very long time, and really had an ear to everything that's happening, do you find yourself optimistic?
Yes. There's no way. We need to be optimistic, and I'm feeling optimistic with everything we are doing. I think people need to get optimistic, period. There's no way. If we just continue to complain and not do nothing and just complain with the other and the other, we just need to get and do things, period. That's how I stand. Yeah. And I'll do my part, and I continue to communicate. And if I see someone that is not doing his job, I'm going to critique too, but tell them, move on. That's it.
I think that's the perfect note to end our official conversation on. Angel, thank you so much for being a part of Puerto Rico Energy in 60 Minute and the Energy Forum. If you have a moment to stay on to continue the conversation, I know that I've cut Tom off a couple of times now.
Uh,
CP has no shortage
I
of additional thoughts.
I
But
got 5 more minutes, but I'm happy to hear Tom because I know Tom want to say something.
yeah,
I,
perfect.
I do actually, I mean it's really along the same theme about the structure of the organization and a number of different parties. And it's true that they're not being organized together well, but the fault is really the system is designed okay. Where the vacuum of leadership is PREPA, right? People talk about, oh, we need a czar, we need somebody who can do everything. We've already got it. It's PREPA. But with the bankruptcy, with everything else, leadership is gone. Power was taken away from them. We need to go back and recreate PREPA because that's the strategic center, right? They've outsourced operations to more competent third parties because of the bankruptcy and the failures before. But it's PREPA that has the responsibility for doing or making sure that they're involved in, and things are happening with all the things that Adiel had mentioned and still there. So, whoever the next director, governor is, we need to reinflate PREPA. I mean, we need to hire people. We need to make sure that there's a budget in there, that they're working on things because it's their responsibility. It's their responsibility to manage their contractors. It's their responsibility to provide information and engage on the legislative front. It's their responsibility, basically subbed in most cases to work with the regulator and make sure these things happen. It's their responsibility to be thinking about the future of the energy system, et cetera, and informing their contractors, in which case, Luma and others who do the integrated resource plan. So the vacuum is really at the management level of PREPA. I mean, it disappeared.
I think you're right, Tom, but I think it's
Yeah.
important not to underestimate the power of resentment. And resentment is such a difficult emotion to backtrack on. When it's easy to forget that when Luma took over operations of the grid, there was sabotage throughout the entire system when it came to slashing
Yeah.
tires of the fleet of cars, throwing away the keys to the offices, blocking access to. I mean, this is something that they're absent calling for renewed leadership. It's just one of these things that there is a deep resentment amongst the different parties here, and they have the political capacity to point their fingers at every other party in the thing where they say, actually, we're not in charge of that element, or we're not in charge of this element, or this is our little fiefdom, and it ends up reinforcing the caciquismo, right, that CP mentioned. And I'm not saying that's the best thing, but I think it just is, it's like, it's a reality. Those are hard barriers to overcome.
But
If you don't, yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead, Tom.
I was just gonna say, if you don't, you either have to you have to change the system and get rid of PREPA and privatize things, or renationalize with God knows what money. I mean, but you can't leave it as kind of the status quo with the vacuum remaining, and that leads you to say things like, we need the legislature to take a more active role, in not just in oversight but in action. Right? There's got to be something for them to oversee.
Tom, I need to agree with you at some point, because on that PREPA thing, if we think about it, PREPA is really the owner of the assets. It's really the owner of the transmission, distribution, generation. So
they're in the monopoly. Yeah.
If this is my house and I get people working in my roof because they are taking care of my pump system for the cistern, I wanted to make sure that they fix it the right way.
Right.
But they don't have now the budget or the resources just to make that happen, obviously. So that's why we're asking, and Adiel asked the right question, who's really in charge? And if we get back to that basics, it's really PREPA. The thing is, that emotional feeling about PREPA, how it was, getting back to it needs to change the vision again. It's leadership. It's how do we communicate, how to get things in that. We got 2 comments or 3 comments here.
We need a rebrand.
Well, and
it should be the government, the DOE, our fathers again.
And Ankel, to build on your analogy, you might care about the people who are fixing your roof, but if the banks told you that they're going to kick you out of the house, what do you care if they drill a hole in it and leave it open when it rains? That's sort of the challenge, right? So we need to have we need to reinstill the sense of pride in the system then, where it says this is my system and I do need to care about how well it's
So the
maintained.
question is, and I need to move on, okay? But it's good about this.
Yeah.
So the question is, what's the new government will do to reestablish our PREPA, which is the owner of the assets, and do all these inspections and are checking with the contractors, with Luma, Genera. How do you hear PREPA getting into that details? No, when something happened, they say, "Oh, we can do it better." We were that doesn't really help too. We need to be able, and I think I agree with you, Tom. I think if we can establish that back again, we got an owner. We need an owner.
Yeah.
What
Yes. Well,
there was
by the
just a
way,
congressional.
the owner is the people of Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah,
the people who are ultimately responsible for the mess that PREPA became in the bankruptcy is the people of Puerto Rico. They elected the officials who turned their back and used it as a cash cow, who borrowed lots and lots of money so they could keep rates low and never repay and drive it in. And the people of Puerto Rico just went about their lives and didn't know and didn't care. And the politicians, I mean, but ultimately it's a democracy.
But we need to get back to that, period.
Yeah.
And get a accountability to the right people, which is us, and getting PREPA to that level probably.
There was a congressional hearing, I guess also in the last month, in the U.S. Congress about the energy grid, and the key absent figure was the head of PREPA, right? So you had the head of the contracting entities, but not the owner of the grid and the owner of the generation assets. That would be a start, right? Making sure that person is always in the room in these conversations. It seems like an important start. Angel, I know you've got to run. Thank you again for being a part of this and for being a part of the Energy Forum. Your audience is always welcome. Siempre son bienvenidos aquí. Esto es el foro para ustedes y realmente se lo agradezco un montón por compartir tus pensamientos con nosotros.
And I can tell you they are active here. So you got Luis Ayala, William Negron, Rodolfo. That's what we do. So thank you very much, guys, to your support and comments. And this is what we need, to have conversations that are to the point. And I think I don't know the details, in all honesty, on the new government that will come, whoever. But in all honesty, that's what we need to have from them, that accountability from day one to make this happen at the at the level that we need. Period. So, okay, man. Thank you very much. Okay, I need to leave.
Thanks, Angel.
Okay.